Welcome to the greatest pod where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer, and today we have an illustrious guest. We've both known this guy for a while. Wonderful podcaster. You can check out his podcast. This is Rad. He has a dope record label, Radlad Records, and he does so many damn projects. I'll let him explain himself, but this guy is awesome. We're lucky to have him. Give it up for my main man, Kyle Clark.
Well, hey everybody.
Dude, we are up early for us on a Friday morning.
We are all real punchy.
Rocking it out, baby. But yeah, dude, I wanted to have you on for a little while, and I'm glad that you jumped on with us today. What the hell are we going to talk about, dude? Because we've been talking professionally for hours and hours every year for years.
Yeah.
So number one, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing well at the moment. You can't be too mad at 11:25 a.m. I suppose. But I've been good, just trying to keep projects and keep busy, because otherwise I go crazy, and that's been a fun adventure. And you threw out for this one, and I had the idea just because it's one of the numerous things that I have worked on in quarantine, and very much found that it's kind of like comedy, where you cannot complain to folks who don't understand what you're complaining about. And I have found that making comic books is of a similar level of blinding difficulty, that I'm just like, all right, we're going to talk about it then.
Kyle has a comic book that he has made, and we're going to talk about how that got done, why it got done, and the difficulties involved, on top of being able for him to talk about the fact that he made a comic book. And
well, what were some of the because I could just say for me, the main reason why I don't do comics is because it's hard.
Yeah, this is part of it, is because this is three comic book people. This is not I enjoy a superhero book from time to time that Civil War was fun. This is people who have ruined their lives with comic books. So I've been curious about that, because you were definitely one of my inspirations last year for learning to draw. And I have wondered, have you dabbled in it before? Have either of you, how far have you gone down this road?
Well, everyone knows that my drawing, especially if you're on our Patreon, are real bad. I'm terrible at drawing. However, storytelling, I'm pretty decent at.
Well, that's we'll get into it later, but yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, so I've come up with ideas for comics when I was younger, and drew them terribly. Also, they were bad stories too. Let's be real. At the time, they were bad stories. I had one guy's name was I can't even say it because I made it. It was like execoidal or something like that. And I spelled it with a Z.
Some sort of Latin American bird.
Yes. He did actually kind of have a bird cape. It was real bad. Big chest muscles. Huge chest muscles.
See, and if you had a little Bill Finger kid to draw it for you and
flesh
out the story, you'd be Bob Kane right now. You'd be the richest man in the world.
Well, so go ahead.
His powers were that he could hide in shadows. And disappear into shadows, and then he could reach his arm out of the shadow and just grab someone and pull them into the shadow, and then they would disappear. I didn't even come up with where they went after they got in the shadow, but that's fine.
Always love a hero whose power is to hide.
Yeah.
Well, dude, also in my experience of doing comics, I used to do samples, because when I was a kid, I just knew that I was the best drawer ever. So I just drew Punisher and Grendel and Wolverine having free-for-alls and shit, or Daredevil and Elektra having a fight, or I did Wizard. Back when I was young, we had Wizard magazine, and Wizard magazine would occasionally have draw this plot, Bart Sears wrote a little plot.
Oh yeah, you got a Brutes and Babes submissions going on.
Yeah, that type of shit. And it just, even at that time, I really did, with that youthful energy that you can do anything. I drew a 20-page comic, and I lettered it. It wasn't great, but I lettered it straight. I put straight edges on it. I wasn't a little kid with just a bubble floating crap. I laid it out. I measured everything. I did it on 11 by 17 Bristol boards. I did everything the pros are supposed to do, and it was 20 pages long. And it sucked, and it was this Sin City homage. I ripped off at least 10 panels from Sin City in it. But you know what? It reads like you know what's going on. And it was like the last time I had enough youthful energy and a reckless abandon to complete a comic. I've done like 2-page stories since then, a shit ton of pinups and covers, quote unquote. But but you know, it was really hard to get back the that youthful sense of like, I got to get this story out. I think that's what comics are. It's the medium for motherfucker, I got to get this out.
It definitely, I have a whole different appreciation for comics like coming out of this process. So I'll kind of set up what was happening. So I'm not sure if you guys heard, but COVID-19 really affected the world for a second there. And so by the beginning of April, I was jobless. My stand-up career, not unlike everyone in the world, was kind of on a hold. And really realized at that point that really all I was doing at that point in life were going to my job and doing stand-up. So it put a hard break on everything. So I had to really kind of refigure what to do with myself, because I am very much a person who, like, if I don't have at least 2 projects going, you got to have 2 projects. So when you get mad at the one project, you can switch seamlessly over to the other. That's really the system I found. When you hate one thing, you just slide it over. And I'm a real like book learner. I love me a correspondence, course, just something to go. So I, just started buying books hard and fast, and found some stuff that was on writing, some stuff that was kind of on the practical, some things was more like the composition and psychological approach. And with the writing, it really came down to this thing of like, okay, you just sort of like write whatever makes sense between you and your artist. But without an artist, it's a near impossible task, because like, even if you did write a script for it, like you would have to page 1 rewrite to kind of work with what the artist actually needs out of it. And I will say, one of the books that I did find super interesting and helpful on the writing front was that Brian Bendis writing comic books, because it's I know I am a different case than some people, because like I majored in creative writing. I almost double majored in literature. I also studied like dramatic writing and screenwriting and shit like that. So like the part where writing books go like, well, here's the first, second, and third act, and have you heard of the hero's journey shit? Like, I'm just like, I don't need this. Throw this in the trash. Like, we need something past this. And what's nice about Bendis's thing is like, he's not telling you that. His shit is a lot more just like, yeah, like you gotta fucking ask your artist what he likes to draw, because like you don't want to just piss him off with a bunch of bullshit, because he's gonna spend way more hours with it than you are. Like, and it's a lot of it was about being very like mindful of who you're working with, and like how to be courteous in that nature, which I've come to discover is very much a controversial point in comics, is the artist-writer relationship. And so sort of like when I was dabbling in like filmmaking, or when I was doing comedy, like I would pick up books, because like I think back to like when I was fucking around with like trying to direct, and like I had a lot of friends who worked crew who were like, my least favorite thing is when a director has no idea what my job is, so he can just like throw a bunch of bullshit at me that doesn't make sense or is weird, or is like a dumb impossible thing. And I kind of took it on myself a long time ago. I'm like, if I'm going to do something, I want to like know what I'm talking about, and not be just like a dipshit with money pointing at things, because I don't have that money and I'm bad at pointing. And so
it's amazing that you're bad at pointing, because you have long arms.
Yeah, long arms. You think?
No, one thing, really quickly here. The thing that you just said about the artist relationship, it is super true in regards to like, you have to communicate to them a certain way, acknowledge them as half of the process, or frankly, for some people's minds,
75% of the process.
Right? And so that part is really hard, I think, for people who are like, come at it from the writing side, and it's a thing that it's in their head, so they need a partner to make it exist. Whereas the artist that never does any comics for themselves has the problem of like, well, what do I like to draw? Like a lot of artists, like literally they know what they like to draw, and they don't do comics, because they can't come up with the story that makes the impetus for you to have to get it out. Like comics, again, they're a get it out medium. You have a story you're trying to get across, and comics are the quickest, cheapest, way. But like the story is super important. So like the Sharks versus Jets thing of artists and writers, I think I just resolved it.
Yeah.
You guys can draw so goddamn good. You're so important, but a lot of you are not self-starters. Writers, you're so talented in your head, but it's never gonna happen because it's not a screenplay.
Yeah.
It's not a book. It's a comic book, and you need these people who are more important than you. So suck on the bottom of their fucking chest like a remora fish and get the shit done.
Yeah, you got to do this crazy thing where you talk to each other. Now, did you hire an artist or did you do it yourself?
This was a perfect segue. So enter Sean Otwell, my fucking angel in this world. I had gone on an episode of Rad on like a light rant about how hard it is to like write comic book scripts, because at the time another friend of ours, I don't know if she has gone public about this. Did she talk about it on the podcast? Jackie Cation was working on a comic book script, and I was kind of following her working on it because I'm like, okay, like you're trying to make good on this. How are you doing it? And started trying to fuck with a couple of things, and then I mentioned on the podcast that I was struggling, and then I get this DM on Instagram from this guy, and it was like, hey, if you write a couple of pages, I'll draw them. This was like in the middle of the night too, and it turns out he had just like drunkenly, impulsively like sent me the DM after hearing that on that episode, and him not understanding that I have zero problem sucking people up into the crazy radness carnival was like cool. And it happened to be that like, a day later I had jury duty, and I had COVID jury duty, so it's a real like this is gonna be a lonely day. So I brought nothing but a notebook. And was like, cool, if I'm going to have to sit here and I'm going to be bored, I might as well be so bored that I force myself to start writing this thing. And so wrote 4 pages at jury duty. And even in sitting and doing that, it was wild because like I had never understood the use of like a thumbnail. And all of a sudden, like I like build this weird system where I'm doing quarter-page thumbnails just to like box things just to see the flow of it. So like what I would do is like outline. I'm getting ahead.
Some of the people listening, explain to them what a thumbnail is. Some people might not know.
I ran too far ahead. Okay, so what I did was like got out the thing, and when you're writing a comic, the first thing you realize, and it's sort of the same thing as a screenplay. I think you can cheat a little more with a screenplay because like when you're filming something, there is a little more opportunity for like improvisation and or like a fine tuning and adjusting. You can write a screenplay and say like, oh, this thing happened, but then if you show up on the day and it doesn't work that way, you kind of roll with it. The terror of a comic is like whatever you say is just now exists on the page, and there's like an economy to like how much you can put on a page, because anybody who's like read a comic book knows that like the flow of comic books are very much a part of the art form, and all this comes from the fact that like I fucking love comics. Like I've always loved comics, and I love a wide variety of comics. It's why I love both you guys. You have very like diverse tastes and stuff. I've never been an all capes guy. All capes guys are often people that I'm just like a little mad at, because I'm just like, you're eating just one piece of food at this amazing buffet. Like comics are the craziest format for some reason. Like they can do everything from fucking Faust to Archie, and then Archie can also fight the Predator, and you're just like, there's no limit to this. But
also that part is the thing that makes them so daunting, though.
Yes,
like literally, it's comics are the largest blank canvas, the most scary blank page.
And it was like, okay, well, what is a compelling like what do I like watching characters do? And I realized my favorite thing to watch characters do is just smoke cigarettes and talk. Like that's just you have a lot of places you can go if your characters start off just smoking and talking. So it was 2 guys in a diner sitting, smoking cigarettes, talking. So it was like, okay, first image, let's do like diner table and ashtray. And so I draw this little box that's sort of a rectangle, the shape of a comic book page, and I inside of it set a panel that was sort of the top third of the page, and then wrote ashtray on diner table. And then next to it, so I would have that on one page. On the other page, I would have like page 1, panel 1, and then like a description of it, and then any dialogue that would appear. And, sort of started with just like one line where it's like, I just don't see it. And then it was like, okay, well, where the fuck do we go from here? And it's like, okay, I've studied enough film to go, well, let's reverse shot for a minute, like a standard dialogue piece. Plus visually, you can kind of establish your two characters, kind of give them their own kind of first moment, because like you really like, it's so strange. Like movies and comics are so different, but they use a lot of the same core stuff, but like the way you have to execute it are totally the opposite, because dealing with like visual art, but with motion versus non-motion, and like, continuous storytelling versus having to like take selected frozen moments, really changes everything out the gate past visual storytelling, but like composition still plays. So here's like the first example. So a thumbnail is like that little rectangular drawing, and it has your panel layouts and whatever notes you have in it, so it can correspond to a script next to it. So you can ultimately sort of send out this little thumbnail, that has sort of how you see the page going, and then like the events happening, as much description as you see in your head. If you have like ideas or designs or like visual references and stuff like that, you can throw all that in there, and then your actual script with the dialogue and stuff. And at a certain point, like the reason you're doing all that is to present it to your artist basically as a like, here's a mock-up of what I have. I sort of see it flow in this way. Here's why. Here's the information I'm going, that corresponds to it. And here's some examples of like, if I reference something visually, like here's some pictures or drawings or whatever, an example of it. I learned the like doing little bits of drawing and little bits of paneling from Grant Morrison, because Grant Morrison thumbnails out the entire book and does like a rough demo of it before he ever gives it to whoever he's working with. And I was like, what a colossal amount of work that sounds like. I sure don't want to do that. Now I fucking have to do that every goddamn time, because it's the only way to make it flow. But then part 2 of that is, and I swear to God, I'll stop in a second, is then you present it to your artist. And again, because like, it's not like I'm paying Sean, we're kind of in this together. Like we're making it up as we go along. And, and he said, he's down to do this. So I want to make it as easy a process as possible. So I'm trying to be kind of fun in the script, because he has to sit and read it a bunch. So I might as well like, try to not be super dry. And, at the start and stop every script, I'm like, hey, if you have a better way to present this, or you think it can be more efficient, or you can dump it down, like absolutely do not feel like you are locked into anything, and sometimes, it is the exact page, the way I thought it out. Other times it's like a whole chunk where I'm like, this is, none of the visuals of what I saw did this, but this is so much more efficient in how he has covered it. He's a big Fiona Staples fan, and he turned me on to the way that she will visually use frames to like pass time while still keeping like, kind of a symmetrical setup. And shit like that is just shit that on the visual level, I've never thought about, doing. And so all of a sudden it's these new weird little tricks. And
that's a great point, because, okay, so my joke about Batman, how he shouldn't be allowed to adopt any more kids.
Yeah, love it.
Well, when I made a T-shirt out of that, and I asked Ed to draw it, and my idea in my head was basically like sort of like stick figures, where it's like a stick figure Batman, and then all of the other Bat family, like a dead, the dead ones, and then Barbara Gordon, and Ed came up with the idea and drew it just a little bit better than that, and sort of put his own spin on it. And if it had
only a little, though, like, don't get too cocky, Ed.
No,
you hear that there? You hear the subtext to what he's doing?
But he basically took my idea and made it a better idea. So now it's not stick figures; it's just like a cooler, sort of.
It's a great
version.
image.
Yeah,
it's legit one of my favorite comic like piece of merch, like a comedian road merch piece. It's so fun.
Yeah, and it's because I gave him an idea and said, well, do what you think would look cool as well. Just sort of keep the joke. And I think, did you add in Barbara Gordon in the wheelchair? Or was that my idea? I can't remember.
No, I mean, that was your idea. I think that the thing about it was I tried to make it was like more or less the Bat family, but it was like those bumper stickers where it's like mommy and daddy and little kids and a dog, and they're these really almost stick figure representation. So like, if somebody had a Bat family one of that, that's what it would look like. That was kind of how I translated it. So
and I think that what was pictured in my head wasn't that, and it was better. So I think that's a pretty great example of like working with an artist with an idea But doing it in a long story format seems like it's a lot more complicated. And some of my understanding is like the biggest problem is like you're probably going to have each artist be different. Like,
Mhm.
you know, who can draw good backgrounds? You know what I mean? Like, do you got to describe the whole background, or do you need to say, "Hey, diner," and then they decide what the diner looks like?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it for me, and I got this from filming stuff long ago, and it kind of carried over, is like, you know, sometimes I'm like, I really see where this is going, and the other times where I'm just like, hey, you know, this I need it to function this way. If you have something interesting here, like feel free to like expand on it, you know, because I feel like I've never understood. Like, I love collaboration. Don't get me wrong, I'm a nightmare control freak, but I also love collaborating. You know, when you're working with somebody, when you guys are on the same page, you know, and you guys can just sort of lock in, you know, there's sort of nothing better. And I found that like one of the things really early on that Sean brought to the table, besides brilliant art, you know, and like he's got this kind of cool style that's, you know, has a little bit of a Charles Burns ink line feel, you know, and very much has that kind of like outlaw comicsy feel. And early on when I was working on it, like one of my huge influences in comics and just in life in general is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and those Eastman and Laird turtles I got into in high school because a friend of mine lost a bunch of my trades and felt bad, so he bought me or gave him, I don't know, but like I have a bunch of the colored first reprints of the early Ninja Turtle stuff, and it kind of broke my brain. This thing I loved as a kid, and you know, was fun, but like the first movie was like, is still my favorite movie of all time. And it was weird reading the comics and seeing like, oh, they really pulled a lot from this. Like there is a lot within this that is right into the movie. So it's been this kind of weird fascination for years. And I got to spend some time with Kevin Eastman years ago, and he is the coolest man in the world. So just that kind of 80s underground vibe was in my head. But I also am a big fan of like the 90s alt comics, you know, run. You know, that's my real vice, is your 8-balls and your hates and your dirty plots and shit like that. And so I was like, well, what if in my mind I like hybridize those, you know, take his art style, but take a little bit of that, you know, kind of funny, you know, not joke machine, but just sort of like grounded version of something. And you know, I said to him, like, well, what kind of stuff do you like to draw? And he's like, well, you know, like a spaceship, or like, I'm trying to think of like what else was like monsters or something, you know, just like fun stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, well, he likes kind of crazy world stuff, but I want it to be kind of talky. So it became this thing of like, okay, I'm sitting here. It's the future, but it's also the 70s because I like everything to be 70s, you know, and it's just the idea that it's like, okay, it's the future, but also like, he drives a flying El Camino and everybody still smokes cigarettes.
So you love the Jetsons, is what you're saying?
Yes. And but the Jetsons are that great 60s Saul Bass aesthetic. And I was like, I want this to be grungy. I want shitty orange shag carpet, but robots are going across it. And so it kind of started riffing within that. And these first couple of pages are just two guys talking about like work before they go to work, you know, in this diner, and then walk out to their, you know, the guy's car, and the car flies away. And I these were these 4 pages, and I sent it to him. And the funniest thing was like, I started writing that first page and I couldn't wait to see how exciting it got. And then it's just, they go to work and one of them learns a lesson.
Well, see, and that's one thing I think is interesting also about comics, is that infinite blank page. It's like, even unto genre, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
when something's in the future, everybody expects a bunch of guns to come out. I honestly would love to watch a movie about future garbage men.
Oh, man, do I have a comic for you then?
Dude, you know what I mean? Because that's the whole thing of like, everything isn't like, we're in the future. For somebody in 1400 looking at our lives right now, so wait a minute, that one woke up, smoked a substance that got him high, then he drank water. Then he goes over to a machine, pushes in some stuff, and his friends are in there. They're inside it and they're interacting. Like, we would blow their minds, but this is not as exciting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's one of those things where representing the future accurately, and I do like that 70s aesthetic you're talking about of like I think it's one of the great things about Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of things
Absolutely.
after Star Wars started looking at the fact that like the reason why most space stuff doesn't get over is nobody lives there. Like there's no scuffs on the wall, there's no gum under the console and Star Trek. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's too clean. It's not.
And I always
real.
love that. Like I love dirty future. It's such a fun thing. And I'm nothing if not somebody who like then wants to like figure out all the whys. But like one of my philosophies in writing is like you as the creator should know these things. Whether you feel obliged to divulge all that information to the viewer, to me kind of is how interesting you are as an artist. Like if you're just dumping all of it on them because you don't trust them, like that's great, but like you're not leaving a lot of like giving it all away. You gotta reel me in a little bit, be a little coy, flirt with me a little bit creatively.
Yeah, the fun thing about that is everybody's going to get something different out of that.
Exactly.
And that's important, and some people are going to want, like, to me, it's totally fascinating to think about nothing ever changing, but everything is also changing at the same time. So to me, that's what that's talking about. It's talking about the idea that now we're in this advanced race where we're literally flying in an El Camino, but we also still have to have jobs and go about like normal ass life shit. And I think about like, and I love the idea of adding an era into there, era. Okay, sorry guys, I can't say the word era. I love the idea of adding that in there because everything just recycles anyways. Like exactly. The 90s has returned, but the 90s was really the 70s.
So here's the fun thing is 70s, like I started using that in the book. So there is it's the 70s layer, but there is this 90s undercurrent that kind of fell into place that became kind of fun because one is so influenced by the other.
Yeah.
And because it became this thing of once they go to work, I had to figure out like where they're going to work. And it was like, it'd be hilarious. What if they work at like Radio Shack in the future? Like I have a real love for Radio Shack because like they act like I've gone to Best Buy and asked for electronics items before that they told me did not exist. And then I bought them for $8 at Radio Shack. So fuck you, Best Buy. And so they're always like the little engine that could for like weirdos who need transistors. And those weirdos need transistors because they're going to make something cool, like a guitar pedal. And then I buy it. But they, having that kind of setup of like, okay, not only is it like jobs in the future and like you still have to work a job, but like it's still a shitty job and still an unsexy job. My least favorite thing in stories, every time somebody's like a cool pirate who turns out to also be the chosen one, I'm just like, well, cool, I can't be that person, but I've worked at a shit job, and gone out to complain about and eat breakfast before. And then like started to populate it. And it was like, I really fell in love fast with like, cause I dabble in comedy and I dabble in horror, but I have not ever dabbled a ton in like science fiction, and immediately kind of hit that and was like, oh, this is that good heroin. Cause you just get to make up everything and you get to build the backstories and designs and how name structures work. And so it was like, okay, well, nobody but this one guy in the team is going to be a human because fuck that. And so like just started going like, all right, their boss is a dog human hybrid creature, with who's dressed like a dad and has a phone belt to on his or phone attached to his braided belt, but it's also a rotary phone. It's and then it was like, okay. And then this girl and she's blue and scaly. And then it slowly turned into, cause he and I kind of went back and forth and she was the hardest design of all of them to kind of get right. Cause we kind of kept hitting it back and forth. And then once we hit it, she is basically just like a blue riot girl. And that was the first time the 90s thing was like, well, I could mess with this or I could just think this is cool like I do and then just roll with it. Ain't nobody upset adding Kathleen Hanna to things. And so it was like, okay, well, you have this blue like riot hair, like riot girl. And then we have like giant purple guy. And then just like a weird dude who kind of has like, it's been funny because he's like the one human is this sort of like sad sack dude in his like late 20s, early 30s. And he absolutely is never something that me and Sean are putting a lot of emotions through. And so from there, it became the game of like, okay, whether I give him all this stuff or not, like let's build the back world for it. And then also like, what the hell is the comic? You know, we have this kind of little chunk of thing.
Story? What's the theme?
And so that became like the fun part of it is like, when I write like a TV pilot or something that I want to pitch, like for me, the fun is literally just the idea of then getting to expand it out, flesh it out. Like that's my favorite part of like writing and being creative, is just like building all that stuff. And so like I just started going, I have nothing to do, I can't leave the house. So I guess I'm just going to like build a weird world and build this timeline. And then outside of that, it became like, all right, if I'm going to do a comic, like what do I like about comics? What do I hate about comics? If I were going to get to do a book, like what would I do that would be like compelling, that I would think is like an interesting thing? And that became a fun challenge. And so it was one of those things where it's like, okay, complete stories. Cause like serial comic storytelling on a monthly basis is why I quit reading monthlies. Like I was just like, this is bad storytelling. Like this is exploitive. And I just spent a lot of money on a book that had no actual narrative forwardness. Fuck you. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not just going to do one complete story. We're going to do two. And so like every story has like two short stories in it that are like contained, but build a larger thing. And it was kind of like Cartoon Network cartoons, like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab, you'd get 2 15-minute cartoons in a half hour. So it was like, I'll do sort of that where like, those cartoons have a loose continuity, but they don't need to be this happened. And then right after that, here goes. And like, I'd been watching a lot of like, I watched all of Star Trek Voyager. I watched a bunch of Farscape, a couple other like old 90s TV shows. Became a really fun thing to see a kind of like storytelling that doesn't get used anymore. Like I think we're going to see like self-contained stories coming back again, because I feel like at some point everybody's like, I don't have 10 hours to like be underwhelmed by something.
Well, I mean, that's the part where you would think that, and you're probably wrong. Because the whole binge crap, dude, I'm telling you, people are really in on that, dude.
They're in on it when they're trapped. I imagine in certain number of years here, when things are back to a world where you can just be outside and be having a life and be doing stuff. And especially if you spent X number of years, like being trapped inside constantly, not being able to do stuff and just binging. I feel like there's a future where it's like, look, you got an hour of my time, and then we're going and playing beach volleyball because we haven't been allowed to.
I mean, I sincerely hope that. I just think that I think that they've created a group of people who are just like,
I just
beach
find
volleyball is outside.
I find it so
sad.
There's room for all of that for everybody. That's the thing that's interesting, is like, because what you're talking about is I love the idea of making something fantastic but relatable, which sounds like what you're doing. Yeah. Because everybody has a job, everybody has weird friends at their job, everybody, has that emotional dude that is kind of like normal but like overly emotional for whatever reason. All of those things you can relate to. But people also love to live in a world where everybody's kicking some ass and is experts at their field and amazing. And,
my characters aren't good at their jobs.
I know, that's what I'm saying. There's room for everything in there.
Exactly.
And that's what's so great about comics and about art in general, is you are going to have people who love that serial type of thing because they love the big story, they love the big drama, they love not knowing where is this going? Like some people love that. Exactly. Some people love that stuff. And other people want that contained story. And there's a place for all of that everywhere. And I think that's what that's why I think you're never going to get like stories, because let's look at two different types of things that have run 18 years, Supernatural, 15 years, serial story that eventually had a sort of ending. But
another big influence on me, as it turned out, because I only recently learned about that show. You have been on Ghost Facers, the fine Canadian podcast about that show. I have been tapped now as a person who's never seen the show. I'm watching the season premiere of every season to see if I can follow 15 years worth of TV show following 15 episodes.
Oh my God, that's great.
All I've learned watching it is that I'm so bummed that for 15 years I was unaware of a show that would have been kind of my dream writing job.
I mean, it's the thing is, that show has way better writing than people think it does, first off. because that's what was good about the show, was that it was pretty funny and it was pretty well written, especially because it was a CW slash WB
before the
show.
CW songs happened.
Yeah, exactly. But then also one of the other longest running shows is SVU, Law and Order in general. And they are complete stories, each episode, that almost don't attach to each other at all. There's
both of those are episodic shows, though.
Yeah,
because Supernatural stories end at the end of episodes.
Yes, although some of them continue.
Yeah,
but there's some of the week and some of the not that. But the point being that
kind of storytelling I like
different shows.
I think more like the other side being something like The Walking Dead. Where they will do like a season where they're just like, we're going to give you the answer if you keep hanging out. And then you get to that last one and they're like, and we can't wait to tell you as soon as you show up for next season. And it's just like, look, you're a fine drug dealer. Please give me closure. And then they give you enough to be like, okay, I'm still in here. But like that AMC really like, found a thing, and it's, it's Breaking Bad, that just Breaking Bad, every episode ends with like, oh, fuck, let's watch one more, which is wildly effective, but I think that like, they start doing that, they're crushing it. And then every other show or like mid-tier producer is just like, oh, like, let's do that, but without any of the artistry or thought or quality of writing.
but also the thing I was getting at is I do agree that in comics, it is super, I think
the solution, we have to save Civil War by starting Dark Reign.
Right. In comics, it's truly like part of their tradition and also getting super distasteful. I get that. Nobody wants to buy a $5 pamphlet for an adventure that they're going to go
comic.
On. Yeah, $5 pamphlet for an adventure you're going to go on later. Nobody wants that. I think if you're going to pay, like my price point is like, if I see a book that's about yay fat and it's $10 or $15, I'm buying it. If I'm interested in the stuff and it seems as though it wraps up at the end, I'm buying it. And that's a whole different market than like television, which is going to be the model. You're going to see 3 anthologies every 10 years. Television will be, go to the next episode. It will be that. Just get ready, because everything is going to be that. Even little kid stuff is getting like that.
Yeah.
But like comic books don't have to, because they're supposed to be what they say in Fight Club. You're the greatest single serving friend I ever had. A comic book is a single serving friend. It's there to be completed. And at the end, you have to be like, ha, that's a good one. And if that person wants to make some more, you have that feeling of wanting to buy some more, but you shouldn't feel obligated.
Yes,
you should feel full of. You should get a.
There's an insecurity to creating that obligation that, as a reader, always kind of bummed me out. And like on the flip, there were handfuls of books that broke my brain, and I wanted more, partially because the stories were contained. Like the one I was thinking of is David Lapham's Stray Bullets, is like one of my favorite series of all time, and it is
great.
Very much interconnected stories with the universe, but each thing is sustained. But you still get, Amy Racecar popping in for something, or like any of these kind of like people who come across all these stories. And that, I think, to me is so interesting, because you're getting to build a world, but it doesn't have to be linear. You can jump around in time, you can jump around in locations, you can jump around in point of view. And to me, that's such a fun thing. And then the collaboration comes in, because so I send it to Sean, Sean's doing this first story, I get a first issue and I finish the first story. The second story is a lot of fun, because I switch over to Sheena, like the Riot Girl character. And I was like, let's go to future community college. Like, again, like what's a place you could go that no one would take you to in nobody is going to community college in fucking Blade Runner. And I just love the idea that like somewhere somebody is just like, man, I got to get my notary's license, but also like I have a hover car.
Right.
I got to stop using hover car as the only example. But what was fun throwing it to Sean was like, I would put a bunch of crazy ass aliens, like when she first enters the school, it's like, all the tables and shit like you see at community colleges, but it's all these crazy future causes. And then like creatures, across all of them. And so like that was, and then what Sean started to do that was fun is like, I really worked hard to not put references into the stuff. And then Sean went ape shit with it and put a lot of stuff in, but because they're not referenced, they're not part of the text, it becomes this almost like Where's Waldo of like weird stuff. And that became this whole other fun game with him, is like he, what's the chicken fat? What's the name that like the comic artists give for just like when you throw all the details in and stuff like that? And he's, like Jim Mafood is like one of my favorite comic artists of all time. And he was the person who really introduced me to that, because he's always putting weird stuff in the background and like little bits and stuff like that. And watching Sean do that, I was like, oh, cool. We've got this weird like Charles Burns, Jim Mafood with screen tones kind of like aesthetic going. So like it now looks like something I haven't seen. And at the same time, there's like a guy with a clipboard, but behind him are like two Vegetas, in hot, in jean shorts talking. And like that became thing like, okay, like this is all now visually and narratively fitting a tone, and so that became this fun game. Like, and the more art I saw from him, the more I would try to kind of match the tone of what I'm doing and the way it flows into what. So it's funny when you look at the first issue, it is two guys figuring out how a comic works. And it is kind of crazy because like I like the first story quite a bit. It was very much like I'm very like proud of what it is. I think like the message of it of like don't, the message of the first story is like it's never too late. Don't give up on yourself when you wanted to try something. No reason to read into any of it at all. And then the second one, by that time, I sort of have a better idea of what I'm doing. I've got the way I'm sort of like doing this thing. I have a whole notebook that I could, just format out page after page, this 2-page setup. And then on top of that, it was like, oh, well, now that I have that and I kind of have made up some of the world and some of these elements, like, let's flesh this out. So like the first page of the second story, halfway, the exact center point of the book, gives you the history of how you got to this future. Because it's actually an alternate future. And it's that we never stopped the space program, and the rest of the countries of the world also got their space programs together. So it's like we hit the moon in 1969, and then immediately after the Soviet Union and China, and all these other, all the way to like, I think it's like India, Norway, Arab Emirates, like all these just different countries start doing stuff on the moon. And by 1975, we have a moon base, and Earth starts to change. By the 80s, we discover that we are not alone in the universe. We join with this kind of federation thing. And then there's all this like weird stuff that like is not explicitly explained yet. But like I have in my head, like the fact that like Earth's government, when it joined the federation, needed like a caretaker thing. So it essentially sold the Earth to a large conglomerate corporation. And so like the Earth is just owned by this like oppressive corporate Amazon-esque company. But like, this is not a book about like the revolution where they change it over. There's just like this shitty thing that hangs over everything because that's how life works. And it was just fun to give them a different subset in my head of like fucked up government and like things like that, because like, oh, it's like the same just active emotional distress that we have living in a world with things like that, give them that same kind of thing, but a totally different variation. So it's fun. There's like stormtroopers who have ties.
Well, and see, and that's I think the banality of evil.
Yes, which is my favorite thing. Like,
right. I definitely get that aesthetic. It's interesting when people. I think one of the greatest comics being the greatest challenge to an artist. I tried to phrase it that way because, like, obviously, there's so many people who like to draw and like to write. But putting those things together into a format, getting the synthesis that you guys seem to be getting on your book and everything is super hard when you're somebody like myself who can write a little bit, who is, I've gotten paid to.
You have a good comic in you.
I definitely know it. But I think the thing that is, I think that the drawback is when you know what you want to draw and you know what you want to write, you can get up your own ass real quick.
Oh,
you can become an Ouroboros real 100%. Quick. And so I think, and also I got to say, man, I think having seen and read about, I'd say 75-80% of the world's greatest comics of all time, I am so daunted by what I know is good. I'm so daunted by what I know is good, and then, like when I look at myself in relation to that, it's ridiculous. Hey, comparisons to Thief of Joy. Yeah, Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Riding. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? All that bullshit is fine, but it still stands.
Oh, absolutely.
I know so much about comics that when I do any of my comics, they are lacking instantly. So I think I just need to get like a weird lobotomy.
Because the dumb asshole goes like, I'm killing it. I also know nothing about the venue. I've decided I'm the master of.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you grow and you get better, right? I mean, when I first moved to LA, when I was 22, maybe 23, I was a youngster.
Years ago.
Yeah, it feels like that. I first off thought I was the best comedian in the world.
Oh yeah.
And I was not. And guess
We've
what?
all been there and learned very quickly that we weren't.
Yeah, and I am still not. I am a pretty good. I'm funny. That doesn't matter. my point is just that, like, go make stuff.
Yeah.
Just go do it. Like, you know, like I wrote a fantasy novel. It's not a good fantasy novel, but it's the first fantasy novel I ever wrote. Did I expect my first fantasy novel to be fucking good? I shouldn't.
American culture, I'm going to be real pretentious for a second. American culture really fetishizes like the prodigy and the genius. And I think it's because they really discourage you from like working hard. Yeah. You know, the idea is like, well, if you weren't at 17 the greatest person in the world at this thing, kill yourself immediately, which is just such a like fucked way to operate, because like even for those prodigy people, they are lying. Like, you know, I have known people who are like in the top percentage of them. They're like, yeah, I'm not the things they say. Like, I am just somebody who's like really just trying to like keep it going. And so we fetishize this thing that doesn't exist because we all love the idea that like we don't have to work for the thing we care about. And then when we do, we're just like, lame. Can't we just be great now?
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, they also encourage you to work at something you don't even like doing. They say, oh, well, you're sort of talented, but you're not talented enough. You should just get a job and then go do that job until you die. And
well,
then,
and go do that job and don't even think about trying to also do this other thing. We only want you to do this one thing, you know.
Only work hard at that one thing.
Well, but also, I think
that's not correct.
But also part of it is the fetishization of like, obviously everybody loves winners and everybody loves a completed process. It's why even in movies, if a character learns how to fight, it's in a 30-second montage. They go from Padawan to Jedi in 30 seconds. And it's because you're right, we have an intense distaste for the wheel of pain that you have to get on to actually get good at anything. You know what I mean? We have an intense distaste for that. So I think that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to have us come on in this hour to talk about comics is because like it's one thing to draw a picture, and then it's one thing to draw a picture with a completed background. It's another thing to crop that picture into a functional panel for a comic. It's another thing to come up with a story that places that picture that you drew with that complicated background in a context that makes it have narrative value. You know what I'm saying? When juxtaposed with other pictures, and finding out, and like you said, the thumbnail stage is looking at the whole comic book page and going, the top half needs to be this big ass picture of Mos Eisley Station. Then this panel right under it needs to be just a stormtrooper's face. Then the next thing needs to be just Obi-Wan Kenobi's face, and then a little fat square panel that shows both of them looking at each other. And then the next page could, you know, and so on and so forth, and just all those decisions. When you have the intense lack of confidence I have, boy, all those decisions start to compile, and you're just like, and then I go, well, I'll just write a screenplay. A screenplay is harder than that. Like, what are you doing? Like, literally, you have this thing you have control over, and I like refuse to take control over it. It's almost like a metaphor, right? I'm refusing to take control of my life. I want to put my shit in a screenplay because a screenplay is nothing unless somebody else says it's something. But a comic book is something.
That's so
right?
real.
That's so real, right? A comic book is something because it fucking exists. And I think that it exists. It has its own merits. It exists as a thing. And that is probably what keeps me from doing it and why I think I might have just broke it right now.
Well,
because, oh my God, you're right. It's crazy how you keep yourself from your dream by not doing it. You know what I'm saying? Or going, I got this other dream that needs other people's approval, and you'll never get it. So you go over there and you're in this milieu of like hoping that one day you'll get other people's approval, whereas you could just do your own thing.
That's how Radland exists. Like I was like, no one's ever going to record an album of me doing stand-up, but I know how to record things and put things out. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Like, and you know, whether it succeeds or not, like I have the final thing and I did the process and I grew creatively from doing it. And then like, once you do something once, it gets a little easier every time. Cause at the very least, like you have been there before, you know where the exits are, you know where the bathroom is, like, you know, the key information in the house. I would now like to point out, so the writing the thing, you know, very difficult, but very rewarding, building the world. Awesome. Seeing Sean's art, you know, go piece by piece. And I mean, like, he can tell you, like, he had the idea of like, I'm gonna do a comic. And then immediately was like, oh, this is 1,000 times harder than I possibly thought it was. And so like, as I'm learning on my end, he is also learning a million things on his end and redoing stuff. All right. Those were the happy, golden, easy years. Cause after that is when it gets shitty. So you have your words and then you have your comic pages, you know, and you've now seen like your thing and what it can look like. You know, you are largely often at that point, like looking mostly at like the pencils. So like even from penciling the actual drawing, you then get to ink this bastard. And then across inking, there's, you know, many different philosophies how to do that. You get to figure out shading, you know, within the book, and there's different styles, approaches to that. You get to figure out whether you're going to rock color. You get to figure out like page lengths and layouts and shit like that. And so that was all a wild game. And so like he digitally, I believe his process is that for the most part, he is doing paper, you know, pencil and paper pencils, and then doing digital inking and toning. And then from there, you got to letter the bastard and put those in. So not only that, you have to think of composition where you can put those kind of pieces in without it breaking it. And that means that like if the dialogue is a lot of dialogue, which I think people often do, especially for like movie scripts and stuff, because it's free to say words in a movie, it is expensive as shit to do so in a comic.
Yep.
And but like sometimes you do have to have a big hunk. So you do like I have a monologue that like a teacher at the community college gives Sheena, and it is a lot, but it's also like the spine of the story. You know, it's sort of like these couple of pieces of information are very important, so we gotta get them out. And so I even wrote in my script, I'm like, dude, I don't know how you're gonna frame this. Good luck. Like, and it was, you know, and so, you know, you get all those. Well, from there, you get to do continuity, you know, and make sure that everything matches. We had I had a whole joke where like a typo in the script made the joke not make any sense because she seemed to go backwards in time looking at a clock twice. And I was like, that can't possibly work. And so you get to do those. Once you've lettered the thing, it turns out I discovered this whole separate philosophy in comics about you know, font lettering versus hand lettering, and how that's a whole thing. And if you want to have a classy book, you know, you're not using Astro, which is like one of the kind of go-to lettering fonts. So you figure out that stuff, and then you know, I have done, you know, I you know, do records. I've got my label. I do a lot of stuff independently. You know, I'm a very DIY oriented person. Well, I go into going like, well, we're probably going to self-publish this because I know 0 people in comics, so there's just no options. So I, you know, set up, you know, the thing. So now I'm going like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to learn how to self-publish things. Certainly all that decade plus of like releasing albums independently, some of that information will cross over. 0, not a goddamn thing. It's breaking my brain how not a single, I feel like something in publishing versus record releasings would be similar by sheer accident or happenstance. And it seems like they are willfully the opposite direction on everything. So I now get to learn how publishing works. I get to learn like how to set up orders. I have to learn how to use fucking not just Photoshop, but like Publisher to like do all that kind of stuff. And so there's just all these different elements of like him. Okay, now he's bulk sending me high DPI versions of the thing, and then I'm going through Photoshop and like checking them as much as I can. I'm a terrible like copy editor. Like I tell stories. My stories are often, you know, need some typos fixed because I'm telling too fast. So like, you know, we don't have, you know, anybody checking that, but like I catch what I can. I get everything set. I get it up to a printer. We, you know, so it was probably, we started it in early June. And I think I got the first round of pressings in September or October, something like that. And then it was also, maybe it's later than that, but it's it also, and that's for 24 issues of something. Like that is one book all the way to printing, and then got the printing back, and the cover had fucked up. I think we were up to 11 typos were found from point 1 to point 2, but like by that point we're already into issue 2. We decided to keep going with it. We kind of put together a strategy, or like not a strategy, that makes it sound very organized, but like what we want to flow with. And the idea is like, let's do 6 issues, because then it's like a real series. It had a run. I don't have these grand plans for like, and then we'll expand the thing. But my thought was like, if I can come back to these, I like this universe. So the book's called Tales from an Analog Future. My thought was I could do blank from an analog future and do separate styles of story if I wanted to come back to it. But like after 6 of these, 12 stories, I don't want to fucking look at it for a minute. So we can pick up, do something else like I dig doing the comics. But so now like we do this run, I get what basically has ended up being an uncorrected set of proofs. Find all these like problems with it, get all these things, and it is kind of disheartening. There's that moment where it's like, the first time I've seen something in publication that I made with my bare hands, and I literally open the box and there is a typo the moment I open the box, and so I was like, well, that's disappointing.
Oh man!
So I sat in a chair for a while, and then I got back up, and now I give them. You both have one, right? Have I given you both them?
No, not yet.
You haven't given me one.
Shit, I meant to give both of you them on 4th of July and failed to do so. But I have proofs saved for both you guys of those. Nice. And so they've been a fun thing to kind of give to people. We did a giveaway on some. So the launched version that we have on Gumroad that we eventually put out is that book. The cover's fixed. Some of the fixes are done, not all of them. So I'm sort of treating it as like a soft beta. And this is actually, now we're into very current. So we hit that. I kind of lost enthusiasm for a while, and just because it was it was so frustrating kind of with dealing with that first one, and then it's also hard because like I'm still living and getting issue 1 published land, meanwhile Sean is doing issue 2, and like again we got better at making the book from story 1 to story 2 and issue 1. By issue 2 we like vaguely know what we're doing, and the book flows better and has all these things, and also like I kind of commit that it's a funny book, that it is, it can have jokes, but the idea was it just can't be a joke-a-thon, but it's more, I keep making the joke, it's Parks and Recs inside of Transmetropolitan.
Oh, no, nice. I like that.
And so my shitty LA shill is it's Parks and Rec inside a Transmetropolitan told like 11 rockets, like just, and then I get shot in the face.
As a turducken of storytelling.
The problem too is like if someone described me that book, I'd be like, here is my money. Like that is so. At least I'm on brand.
That sounds great.
Like I'm making a book at least I would buy, and that was kind of the one rule. But like issue 2, we get to do a little more. It gets to be a little funnier. He is starting to like, we now have kind of a better sense of like what creatures in this world looks like. So he gets to really keep doing stuff. So the first story in issue 2 is about the guy from the first issue who he wants to get into nanofog, which is like these tiny little drone things that you can then create 3-dimensional places and spaces and designs from. So like he sees like an old man do it who like makes dinosaurs appear. And he's always wanted to try it. He was worried he's too old now and he's never going to get into it, and his life passed him by. So this one, second issue, is he goes to an open mic by himself and no one knows to do nanofog. Again, I, a comedian, and Sean, a musician, have no reference point for the shame of the secret lone open mic run. And but basically, it's run by hippie. I based it on the Unurban, and so it's run by hippies. And in this world, once we all found aliens, every alien race.
Before you go on, I just want to say, people out there listening right now, the Unurban is a place that had an open mic for probably 20 years,
20-something years,
maybe longer. And it was not only a fun mic, but it was like a place you could get a muffin made from like the grains of from Africa, or it was just so hippie and so fun and such a cool place to work out with really diverse types of comics, from like your stupid frat idiot to your like really wordy all message comic, and you got a huge diverse sort of thing. So I love the idea of this guy doing an open mic, and I love the idea that the theme is basically like, it's never too late, do something you love.
Exactly. And then,
Mhm.
the layer we add to it is, so in the future, once we meet aliens, we figure out all aliens have drugs and different alien races have different drugs. And clearly we all have to do them.
Mm.
And so the two things you learn is, one, you have to keep track of cross alien drugs of like what your compatibility rate is as a species. Cause like something that could be ecstasy to one species instantly kills somebody else, or like makes you vomit and shit. Like you need to know like what your compatibilities are across. But then on top of that, certain ones, if you do too much of them, your body starts to they call it the melt. Like your body starts to sort of like reconnoiter, and you basically slowly turn into like Ralph Steadman and R. Crumb drawings.
No,
And
that's
so
terrible.
this whole place full of these things is full of all these like melted, insane, weird, hippie, druggy alien creatures that now just like look like the Freak Brothers and shit. And they're the ones mostly doing the open mic, and then he's the normie. And so it's fun to get to do open mic jokes and then also like all this weird stuff. So like, again, so that's like issue 2. Meanwhile, at issue 1, I'm just like, damn it, we published it wrong. We got to figure it out. And then like Sean ended up having to redesign some of the stuff. So now we're hit this point where it's like, okay, we had our false start, we learned from it, and now we're going to get the first 2 printed together. We're going to do issue 1 special edition, when we get it out there full, and kind of just have a better sense of it. But it's I really truly appreciate like both people out there doing it on their own. You look at all those guys in like the 80s explosion. Oh, also we have now picked up like a copy editor and a letterer. Like we had a few folks who listened to This Is Rad, and I put out an ad on our Patreon Discord, and I had a lot of people pick up, and we ended up with 2 really talented people. Turns out we have a lot of good copy editors and editors and stuff like that in our listenership. So shout out to This Is Rad listenership. They are smarter than I am. But so we got it all together. We have this little machine going, and it just, I look at people who do this stuff all the time, and even like the world of zines I've gained a real appreciation from. I have like a side project that I want to do where I'm actually drawing it, but more as like a mini comic design, and it's just like, what an unrewarding, long, lonely, difficult task. And it's lucky that this is like the best thing in the world, and the comics rule so hard, because I cannot fathom if you do not love this thing. It does still make me mad at shitty comics, like lazy ones, not like shitty comics like, oh, the drawing's better, but like when somebody, especially like big books, when they're just like slapdash together, I'm like, this took so much work. Why didn't you care about it? Because like an ugly book that doesn't work that somebody cares about reads different than something that's like a fucking jobber book made by people who are like shitting it out for a paycheck because they need that part of the publishing spot to be held on the direct market rack.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you bring that up, because like I think that is another part of it, the overall passion for storytelling. And again, that's why as we wrap up here, we're looking at this as the hardest artistic endeavor, because after all of the stuff you're talking about, from all the copy editing that you didn't know how to do earlier, and all the visual communications that you have to do with your collaborator and all that shit, then you get it down into a form, and then you got to sell it. So you had to come up with all these, like, the world has expanded in your mind to be like a giant Bible of stuff. And the first thing you have to do is tell some asshole it's Die Hard on a fucking boat, or whatever. You know what I mean? Which is so like,
but that's how much I care. It's the first time I've ever thought of one of those.
But exactly. But that's the thing, dude. Like log lines, quick pitch, your query, all that shit.
And let me say to you out there listening right now, if you're gonna get into this stuff, that shit is important.
Yes.
Hear me when I tell you that if you can't explain what your story is in some cool, quick way that grabs a person's ears, you cannot sell that shit. And I'm sorry to tell you that, but come up with the idea, come up with something that sells what it is. It's a cowboy who has lightning powers and struggles with self-esteem. That's a shout out to a guy who of a book I wrote who listens to us right now. He knows who he is. So, be able to say something like that, because if you don't have something that tells what it is, you're never, ever going to be able to sell it. Tell it in simple form.
And if you're a member of this audience and you're listening right now and you work for Fantagraphics or Oni Press or Slave Labor or Drawn and Quarterly, hit me up.
Well,
email Kyle Clark at thisisrad.
But also it's again, the passion though of comics. I think comics are also more of a passion play than almost anything, because again, if you write a novel, there's a clear route to that becoming a thing or not. If you write a screenplay, same thing. Write a play, same thing.
Yeah.
But a comic book, it's like you are utterly, it's like having a baby. It's more like having a baby than any of that other bullshit, I promise you. Because
Absolutely.
you got the lettering is fixing a little motherfucker's teeth. The fucking the colors or whatever is making sure his hair doesn't come in all patchy.
Needs braces, and it's going to be tough,
dude. That baby needs a new pair of shoes. and so all of that shit is like, and it all being on you is the biggest. It's a huge commitment. And then when you look at the fact that like most independent books, we talk about you'll never be able to sell it. You'll never be able to sell it anyway.
Yeah,
because you're going up against Amazon and Warner Brothers and Disney.
Well,
but
and
you
half
do
the
it
books
anyway.
That the big two put out anyways are underselling at any given point in time. Like,
exactly.
The industry is held up by like 6 books at any given moment.
Exactamundo. So the big boys are failing their asses off, and you come sauntering into the party,
and you're failing without billions of dollars worth of intellectual property.
And the thing is, you still got to do it. That's what makes me know it's the hardest thing, and it's the biggest passion.
Well, but that's what I think should be inspiring to somebody is like, if you're doing this shit and like they're struggling, and you're like, I'm struggling and getting my shit figured together, and I am one person. You've been doing this for 50 years and have billions of dollars. What's your excuse?
Exactamundo, which is why, I mean, Suicide Squad just came out and everybody's blowing it so hard, but it's just like, talented people applied to those products could have done this a long time ago.
Yeah,
like I mean, I'm not talking. No, scratch that. Not talented people. The right talent, coordinated correctly, could have done. We could have had a dope ass Man of Steel and Batman movies for the last like 7-8 years. We could have. We didn't.
Yeah.
It was like a choice. It was
Man of Steel was a choice.
Yes, it was.
And it persisted. But so it's just like that.
We have to live with it.
So in that regard, like comics are that the greatest, like say fuck you to a hurricane type shit you can do is to make a comic book. Because
and the small press world of comics is incredible. Like the sheer volume of constant talent out there and happening is kind of head exploding. Like and that I feel like, if anything, like I cannot wait to try to get out to like Small Press Expo or something, like when the world opens back up, and not like to put my book out there, sure, but also to just like meet all these people I've discovered and just admire on such a crazy detail, because I'm just like, you mad person, like you're doing this by yourself in Wisconsin, and it's like the most beautiful thing I've seen.
Well, and I would also so for people who have listened to this conversation and listen to all this passion about comics and all this jazz, that I think the thing that is incumbent upon somebody who feels that way and can is to support independent comics, number one, support comic book stores, number two, also support Kickstarters and Indiegogos of people, and also support the people that that are artists. If you do all of those things, you will be making the world a better place, because it is incumbent upon us as an audience to smarten up and not go, is this the one where Batman gets his mustache back? And just fucking stop it. Just stop with that shit. This is not the one where, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't the one where anything will happen at Marvel or DC. The one where the thing is going to happen is never going to come. Read somebody's $10 garage book they made. It'll probably be better. And
they're better. And if not, at least they're a crazy person, and there will be something in there that's wild.
This is what I suggest. When you go to a comic book convention, sure, go look at all the big things, but then go to Artist Alley and you buy this crazy thing called Monk's Tale.
There you go.
Some dude put together. That's a bunch of really chubby martial artist guys doing fun stuff.
Yeah, that's right in my alley. This is great.
This is what
that
you
rules.
Do. Yeah, it's so fun, and you're supporting artists, and you get them signed by the dudes. They feel good, you feel good, you get a great story, and then life is better for everybody.
Can I make a quick recommendation of a couple of things if somebody's listening that if they are interested in doing comics that are probably, again, out of the pile of like how to make comics and draw and composition and stuff like that? I have 2 books that I think like as a pair are the perfect like take home comic book school. So like this is excluding like you know, figure drawing and background drawing and all that kind of stuff, but just as far as comics go, cartooning, philosophy and practice from Ivan Bernetti. It's a tiny little book. It's an 11-week or 14-week course where by the end of it you make a full color 6-page comic. I think that the way he approaches explaining how comics work and the relationship between words and pictures and how to do them and time telling and stuff like that is truly on another level. Like it is a spectacular 5 out of 5 book. And that gives you all of that kind of stuff. The other book that works in tandem with it is called Drawing Words and Writing Pictures. And it is by Jessica Abel and Matt Madden. And it is, again, I think it's like 25 lessons. And again, you end up with, so both of these books, part of what I think is important is you will walk out of both of them with a lot of comics that you have already made at this point. Oh, cool. And Drawing with Words also has a sequel called Mastering Comics that is also spectacular. I think like those three as a whole, if you are interested in making comics and feel intimidated or don't know how it works and stuff like that, if you buy those 3 books, you will make a comic. Like as long as you follow what they do and go along with it and are a good student, like you will make comics. And that you will sort of like with stand up, where like if you get up and do stand up, you have now done more stand up than most people who want to do stand up will ever do. If you roll through one of those and do some stuff, like you're going to end up not only like making stuff, but you'll have done your shitty stuff and learned and gotten better by the time you finish those 3 books. Like, so I just like, I want to give them a shout out because I think all 3 are truly above and beyond. Like there's a lot of really trash books out there about how to like make comics and draw and do all that stuff. And these 3, I just cannot express enough how excellent I think they are and how useful they were to me.
Awesome. And then the other thing we would like you to do is, you know, tell them where they can find your comic book and you in general. So
I am at Kyle Clark is Rad on the Twitters and the Instagrams. There is at Analog Future Comic is the Twitter and Instagram for it. They're not the most active, but we're working on it. Our comic is on Gumroad. If you go to search Tales from an Analog Future Gumroad, you can get it there. It's up there for $6. You get a PDF and a CBZ file with it. I will say that it is. I do not think that this Gumroad page will be up forever. I plan to probably pull it when we do the official launch. So this is very much like a kind of like limited beta window, which people don't know. I'm actually announcing that on your guys' podcast. And so it will be out there. So if you want to go check it out and be an early adopter, definitely check that out. And then hopefully, fingers crossed and everything, my goal is to have at least the first issue available when I go on the road later this year. Yeah. So because that also became like, I'm still a filthy degenerate comedian at heart. So like I've gone through all of this and at the end of the day, my brain's like doing it because like CDs don't sell the way I used to. We need a product and them kids love comics.
I love it. It's a great idea. Well, and also just for our listeners, I'm going to assume some of our listeners are already This Is Rad listeners. Chance.
Hey guys.
But if you're not a This Is Rad listener, you should be. It's a great podcast where Kyle explores what is rad. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to.
We go all over the place.
We talked about rollerblading.
And you're one of 2 rollerblading episodes we have. So if people are looking like what level we'll do, like if you like a thing, don't worry, we might do it twice.
Yes, absolutely. So
I think I want to.
This Is Rad.
And I know you've probably had some white college guy come on and talk about a Wu-Tang, but I'd like to come on and talk about.
Well, we have not actually, and you know that like that literally there are large swaths of culture that are fun white guy stuff that I've taken away and only it can do.
Dude, so like I would love to come on and talk about the mystique. Of Wu-Tang.
We're gonna do that in August because I have done nothing for the last month, but basically just listen to Wu-Tang. I've been on a real kick. It's been hard to shake. Like the lists go, and it's just like I need to listen to things that aren't Gravel Pit for at least a little while.
Fair enough.
That's fucking great. So like, yeah, and everybody, I think I'll announce on this particular podcast the experiments I do from looking at those books that Kyle just recommended, and also just little stories that are in my head are going to start showing up on the Patreon. So
hell yeah!
You'll be able to see my middling efforts. It's not just going to be the art that we send you for the $7 tier, but on all tiers, you'll get to see little stuff that I'm drawing and little pages that I'm working on and stuff. I kind of want to be open with that process as I like transition into trying to do my own thing, because like we were talking about earlier, it really is, it dawned on me as we were talking, like you're just prohibiting yourself from having your own thing. It's not even about fear of people liking it or not liking it, because we have an audience. So that's not the point. The point is, like, if you're always worried about somebody else's approval, you'll never do anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So comics are the ultimate way to say, fuck your approval, bitch. I'll draw these pictures, and then it's a snuffleupagus with titties, and it's a bounty hunter. That's my comic. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what you do.
That shit is out there, and that's what rules.
Absolutely. So you can join our Patreon, by the way. You should join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/thegreatestpod. You get extra podcasts, and you get art sent to your mailbox if you want that tier. That's it. That's the short ad. I just wanted to get that out because we need to do that.
Our Patreon is the only place I've posted any of my art in since COVID and stuff like that. My girlfriend is trying to convince me to turn my Instagram into like an art page, and I may do that instead of just not using it.
Oh, yeah, trust me. I know that struggle. But thank you so much for being on, Kyle, and good luck to you in all your endeavors.
Of course,
and
love you boys. Thanks for having me.
We're gonna see each other at the small press. I can feel it.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get boosts together and we'll shit talk people. It'll be great.
Woo! So for those of you who are listening and supporting, we appreciate you, and thanks for listening to another episode of The Greatest Pod.
Tight.